Is this thing on? Listen, I'm not a YouTuber. I'm not going to do no fancy intro. You're here to listen to Jeff Kam's episode of the Ronin Radio podcast. It doesn't disappoint. Jeff's known for, in the past, maybe leaking some information he might not have been allowed to. I can say that this episode, you are completely allowed to listen to this information. But I will say that you probably don't know the information that you're about to hear. So with that, I hope you enjoy the episode. And Jeff, thank you for coming through. It was honestly my pleasure. I've left it largely unedited so you guys can just see how great a conversation it was. And yeah, enjoy the music for a little second and we out, bro. One take wonders. No, I'm joking. I did like fucking 15. See you in a bit. Bye. Yo, just pause one sec. If you're watching this and you're not following this, what the fuck? Alright, carry on. Alright then, welcome back. This is the Ronin Radio podcast, and I'm excited today because we're talking with the one and only Jeff Kam. Jeff Kam, I don't really use the free, but Jeff, oh man, it's been a minute. We were just catching up on the last time we spoke, which we got to the agreement that it was just before Axie Core in September. It was on a live stream, so a little bit more different this time, but I'm excited to be able to catch up. Jeff, welcome, man.
Yeah, man, dude, Gila, it's amazing to be here. Always have fun chatting with you. It's been a while, like you said, right? Last September, I think we last talked, right before AxieCon. So times are different now, right? We got a lot more going on, and the market is different, right? We're in a different market climate now, so yeah, there's a lot to catch up on here.
Yes, most definitely. Different market climate you mentioned, and that's funny. We'll get there. Yeah, for sure. Why one of the bases I like to announce it at the beginning. The products team, and just to announce, you're in the products team that Sky Mavis have been for a while now, transferred through working at the likes of Discord beforehand, so seasoned professional in the field, a lot of experience as well. App.axie, the website in which Axie Infinity essentially revolves around the marketplace, also the hub for the player essentially with their inventory and all things that they can trade in the Axie universe in Lunasia. It's so pivotal to what the product of Axie is right now, and I'd love to be able to dive in just a little bit into the team itself and operations and even aspirations, so to speak, of you guys in the product team. So starting there, I think one of the things I wanted to do, since it's been a while since we have spoken, is touch on what has changed since that time. So if we go September of 2022, I honestly think we had a completely different website, pretty much, right? We've had a makeover, all sorts of things.
Yeah. So if we think back to AxieCon, right? The big thing at AxieCon was I went on stage. My first time talking in a public setting like that ever, right? Like I did a few podcasts here and there, but for the most part, that was my first sort of like conference that I spoke at, right? And I was excited to do it, right? Because I was excited to present app.axie, right? And if you go back and watch that VOD, it's like I was like introducing app.axie, right? Mm-hmm. App.axie is the representation, the physical representation of Axie Core and Axie Infinity and it's how you interact with the Axie ecosystem, right? And so we presented that, right? And before that, it was just the marketplace, right? And so that was the big pivotal moment for app.axie, in that it was being introduced, and like the idea of a community hub, right? An ecosystem hub existed, right? And I think people before that, they kind of had the idea of like, okay, yeah, Axie, app.axie, the marketplace is kind of like what you think about when you think about, everything outside the game, right? But we sort of formalized that back then. So that was one of the biggest, differences between now and then. But a lot of other differences.
Yeah.
The team has grown, right? The team has grown a lot. My role has changed as well, and we can get into that as well.
Okay.
And yeah, we hired some more designers, we hired some more product people. The Ronin side of Sky Mavis, exploded, right? We launched a ton of things on the Ronin side. We had a new rebrand and everything. And internally, right, we grew a lot. We hired a lot of other people, a lot, amazing new team members, and just diving in deep into Axie Infinity, Ronin, the Mavis, right? The Mavis, section as well, right? And so those three big buckets, Ronin, Mavis, and Axie Infinity, those each one of those areas sort of like developed and became its own identity, right? And all under Sky Mavis, right? So yeah, a lot has changed since AxieCon and the last time we talked, but it's exciting.
Yeah, for real. I mean, you said it there, and like all three of those fronts have changed, or even become. Well, I mean, Ronin did have its own, interface with Katana, and obviously you could go into analytics and those types of things. But like, if we look at what the Ronin website is today, and then obviously you look at app.axie, and then of course Mavis Hub as well. All three of those things have brand new faces, so to speak. And really professional. It makes it's very assuring when you have interfaces that are none different from what you would see and expect at the height of any other industry or any kind of when you're interacting in the internet. And that's something in Web3 that's quite rife, and I think it might be overlooked sometimes, where it's like it's okay because of X and it makes up for it, but really and truly, as a power player, you want to be able to be we can do this, and that's good that it's being displayed, and that only gives credit to the team itself. You mentioned obviously internal expansions, bringing people in, bringing talent in, which is of course important in the growth phases. I thought if you could maybe like talk us through experiences you've had this year with the like developing, maybe I know what it might be, I don't know what it might be like leading up to like the launch of the changes, or when Atia's blessing came into operations, those types of things. So from your experiences, do you have one that maybe stands out from this year?
Yeah. So I think it's important to go back a little bit and give some context. So when we last talked, it was like September, right? AxieCon had just happened. We there's a lot. Origins was like the big focus of that year, right? We had just launched it. We were getting it to a good place. We had the first big like tournament at AxieCon that Spam and Rice, right? Spam won that.
Right? No, it's
okay,
the ever so powerful, yeah.
That's right. Spam got second, and we had the last final big V2 tournament, right? The Axie Classic tournament, and then after AxieCon, we just went into insane building mode, right? And then towards the end of that year, so December, November, I started thinking about Axie Infinity really deeply, right? And that was the inception of Axie Core. So Axie Core is basically a return to our roots, right? Like we've heard Axie Core a lot. We had a blog post about Axie Core talking about it. I've name dropped Axie Core in the Discord and on Twitter constantly, and everybody's heard Axie Core, right? But it's really hard to like understand like what it is, right?
I was going to say this. I don't want to be controversial in saying it. Do you think it's well understood enough? Because even from my perspective, like I know what Axie Core is, but there's still like elements that I might not be acting in a certain way without that understanding.
Yeah. So I think it's one thing to so this is something that I still battle with every day, right? Like how to talk about Axie Core. And the strategy that we took, and I don't know if it's the right or wrong one, is that we introduced Axie Core and we defined it, right? We said, here, this is what we think Axie Core is, right? And then, but there wasn't anything tangibly that people could feel quite yet, right? So we were basically introducing a concept, right? But people were just like, okay, what does that feel like? What does it mean? What can I do, right? I'm just gonna go back to play Origins, right? So that's kind of what it was like. And I don't know, like maybe the best strategy would have been not introducing Axie Core and instead just building it, right? And then people slowly start feeling it over time, you know? And like internally, when I was, you know, thinking of Axie Core and naming it and like sort of creating it and think about how to talk about it, it made sense in my mind, right? Like, so Axie Core is basically a return to our roots, right? So like back in the day, right? Like the first thing ever for Axie Infinity was the Axie Infinity contract that we deployed, right? And that is the essence of Axie Core, right? It's the core assets, shared resources, mechanics, the lore, right? All these, the central stuff, right? The public goods that all the games and experiences within the Axie community tap into, right? If you want to be a part of the Axie ecosystem, you tap into Axie Core, right? And a good analogy that I have is that Origins, Homeland, you know, Builders Program games, Axie games, those are all theme parks. They're businesses, right? And Axie Core is the city. So with Axie Core, as we build Axie Core primitives and features and expand that, we're basically expanding the infrastructure of the city that these businesses and theme parks exist in, right? So these are things like public goods, right? Like a city provides a water system, right? Electricity. And
it's ironic you bring up water systems right now. Sorry, there's just the crisis going on with the water companies in the UK right now. Carry on. Sorry for the trading fault.
To touch on it, but like a city provides this core infrastructure, right? These public goods that businesses and things are attracted to, right? Incentive systems, right? Businesses come to certain cities because of certain things like that, right? And that's what Axie Core is, right? Axie Core is building those core primitives, the infrastructure, to attract people to build within it, right? So we want more games, right, in Axie Infinity. We want the community to be inspired and incentivized to build Axie Infinity games. We want big established developers who are experienced at building games to look at the Axie IP and be like, I want to build there, right? They have the community, they have the infrastructure, they have everything that is attractive about building a game, and I want to build there, right? So that's the essence of Axie Core. And in the process, we tap into things like your emotional connection with your Axies, right? Because all of these core infrastructure and primitives and experiences across the games and tying all the games together creates that strong emotional connection with your Axie, right? It's no longer a fragmented ecosystem, right? If thinking before, right? Like if you think about like now even, right? Like games are very fragmented today, right? You have Origins, you have Homeland, you have Doll, right? You have Across Lunacia, you have
fragmented how so? You mean in terms of like disconnected in terms of gaming universes, they don't interact in any way?
Right. Like they share pretty much two things in common, right? And some share a little bit more. One is Axies, right? You use the same Axies in all the games, and that's great, right? Interoperability, very important. Second is the same IP, right? They all build on top of the Axie Infinity IP. But this is not enough, I think. It's not enough. I believe that we need to go further in order to sort of push Axie Infinity forward and make it feel like a more cohesive universe, right?
The deeper the layers go, and excuse me for trying to dive down this rabbit hole, but the deeper the layers go, essentially like is like expanding and broadening the accessibility, the asset itself, the Axie at core has in itself, in its existence. If those layers deepen the so for my example comes from obviously having part upgrades eventually, and those types of things, like having the opportunity to deepen your asset itself can provide more value in a long run. It might be emotionally attached to you because you've been through X amount of years and journey through a certain Axie, or it might be the fact that what you achieved with a certain Axie is extremely rare and valuable to so said collector.
Yep. Yeah.
I see what you mean with the importance of that, because it's like you expand this universe of Axie, and like assets are going to need a reason to be proprietary and special to the player as well.
Right. So if you imagine like drawing out the Axie Infinity ecosystem map, right? You have Axie Core, Axies in the center, the IP, the lore, right? We have some shared assets like SLP and and AXS and things like that, but that's as far as it goes, right? And each game sort of uses all these things, and that's great, right? Interoperability. But what we don't have are connections between the games, my progress in one game does not carry over to another game, right? That's what I mean by each game is very fragmented. The ecosystem is fragmented, and each game is sort of siloed, right? Each game has its own thing going on, its own progression, its own lore, right? Its own thing, right? And when I go over to another game, I can use my Axie in that game, but nothing about my previous experiences carry over, right? Mm-hmm. My Axie doesn't remember anything, right? And that's what we want to solve with Axie Core. So we'll solve it at the Axie Core level, right? And incentivize games and builders to sort of tap into these things, right? Yeah. So one big thing here that you've probably heard a little bit about is AXP, right? Axie Experience Points.
Yeah.
So this is
it's a very old concept, in fact, though, isn't it? Into like, I know it's recently been brought to our attention, but
yeah. So we had experience points, right, back in the day, pre-classic, right? This was back when Axie Infinity wasn't
way back,
right? Yeah. So this is before my time, way before my time, right?
I was in the incubator.
yeah.
And hatched.
So you could play with your Axies in the auto battler to earn experience, right? Earn experience points, and you use that experience to breed your Axies, right? And that's what it was back then. And we deprecated that a long time ago, but a lot of Axies still have this legacy EXP, right? Still inside of them, right? And so we're bringing that back. And I sort of independently, on my own, thought of AXP, right?
Yeah.
I didn't know too much about the legacy EXP system, but I realized that we need something that ties together all the games in the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. If Axie Core's goal is to make a cohesive ecosystem, right? An ecosystem, a universe that feels like one giant game with a lot of small games in it, right? How do we do that? Well, first we need something to glue it all together, and that glue is AXP. So Axie Experience Points is a new Axie Core feature that we're getting ready to ship very soon now. But what it'll allow you to do is earn experience points, AXP, in one game, right? And your Axie earns AXP and levels up at the core level, right? So your level and AXP earning is independent of any game. So it doesn't matter if you're playing Origins, Homeland, Doll, right? You'll earn AXP and your Axie will level up, right? Yeah. And with this, you now have a shared progression across the ecosystem, right? So I can play Origins, level up, and my Axie will be the same level in Homeland or Doll, right? And so now we've glued together the games and tied together the games via this new mechanic, AXP, right? And that's one example of an Axie Core primitive or mechanic that can bring together the ecosystem, right? So we'll start with AXP because it's a really, really important first thing that we have to do before we get to further Axie progression, right? But yeah, so I don't remember what we were originally talking about.
No, like it's necessary. I think like a lot of people now who might have been on the fringe of what Axie Core was like, we've dived quite deep into it there, and you've actually like expanded my understanding of it and like the real meaning behind it. And that word glue, it sticks out. That's essentially what the AXP AXP will be, and like unifies the gaming universe, so to speak. So it's like that's so important. And then I think the next question from there forward is like, okay, yes, we acquire this AXP, and again, like if this goes into the realms of like we might not be able to talk about it, like how then is that? Why is that important to me? Why is it important to me that I have AXP across multiple games?
Yeah. So just um, like any Axie Core primitive, right? It inherently doesn't really have utility. So think about Axie parts, right? If you imagine an Axie, but imagine no games exist, what do parts do?
Yeah.
Right? What do they do? Nothing, right? People talk about like their utility and origins, how strong they are, and things like that, but they're talking about origins, right? Now, my job, right, as the product lead for Axie Infinity and Axie Core is I have to think about it holistically, independent of any one game, right?
Yeah.
So as I design AXP and leveling and part upgrades and all these Axie Core features, I have to think about, okay, what does it do like if there are no games, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be a fun experience that has a complete core loop, right? In the same way where like you can play from beginning to end and still experience all the things within Axie Core without having to touch any game, right? And so knowing that, parts don't have utility, right? And like inherently, right? Inherently the utility is I want a part because it completes my collection, right?
Yeah.
I want to collect all the parts. I want to make my Axie look cool with a very specific part, right? This is all, horizontal progression is what we call it, right? Like if you want to progress today in Axie Infinity, you just acquire more Axies, right?
Yeah.
That's what people do. They increase their collection, right? Or they try to achieve a really cool look, right? Maybe I want all parts that are the same color of my Axie's body, right? Whatever, right? And so inherently, the parts don't do anything, right? So in the same way, AXP and leveling, they don't inherently have a thing, right? But we can add those things, right? Games, when you bring in games into the picture, that's when the real utility comes in, right?
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be the only utility. Parts and AXP and leveling, they should have utility inherently within Axie Core, like I said, to complete that loop, right? The game loop. So for AXP and leveling, it'll be a core requirement for upgrading your parts. So once we ship AXP and leveling, right, it'll become a new primitive that games can tap into. Games can issue AXP. They can give levels, on-chain levels utility if they want. Like, Doll could say for every level your Axie is, it might do X thing in my game, right?
Yeah.
And so in the same way that Doll says, okay, if you have carrot tail part, this is what it does in my game, right? And so these new AXP and leveling becomes new core primitives, but also at the very Axie Core level, inherently, you'll have to be a certain level in order to upgrade your parts. So that is a way that will throttle
the necessity for it.
Upgrading all their parts immediately, right?
Cool.
Yeah.
No, I really like that as well because it presents the opportunity for the external creativity as well. Like you said, this is the glue that puts together. If somebody wants to use the Axie IP, that's what they have to tap into the core, and then it presents to you the task of how creative can you be around utility behind things that inherently don't actually have utility but are part of the Axie Core loop as part of the product. Nah, that's fire, man, and it's an interesting perspective as well to look at because even when you look at it like this as a consumer or as a person that is playing the game or purchasing the Axie as a collector, you don't look at it from the product designing perspective. Like you just don't take that holistic view a lot of the time. So that in itself for me sounds difficult. I wondered if I've seen through videos, unfortunately not in person yet, how beautiful the Ho Chi Minh City office is, Sky Mavis office, the headquarters. Do you spend much time there? Because I know you're US, right, based?
Yeah. So I'm based on the West Coast here in the US, and specifically the Bay Area. which is where I grew up.
Let's
But
go.
so late last year, right, when I was conceiving Axie Core and when Axie Core was becoming a thing, right, I decided to move to Vietnam for a little bit so that I could, for the purpose of going to Vietnam and selling Axie Core and getting people on board with it, right? Because it's, you know, it's one thing to just think of something and then build it, but it's another to sort of get everybody on board with it, get the, you know, transfer your vision, get people excited about it, right? And completely understand, you know, where it's going, right? And so I told my wife, and we packed our bags. We carried our, you know, 2 toddlers on a plane, and we moved to Ho Chi Minh City in January, on January 1st. And we spent like, you know, 5 months there. And I just got back to the United States like a month ago.
Wow.
And so
that's off, man. That's I love that though, because that shows, yo, that's hunger. Like, listen, we got, like, there's a vision that I have here. I believe in it. You know, I honestly think this is the best for the game itself, for Axie itself, and I want to go and make sure that people understand it. And you know, it's difficult after we have like the COVID era and a lot of disconnected interactions in the workplace. Having that hands-on and being in a room with people, being able to spend the day, you know, have the time off as well, the lunches, what the outside of the offices, I reckon they actually they compound in a very good way for team spirit as one, and then of course the cohesion of understanding a common goal. So you know what, in terms of like the advancements that have happened, you said, you know, January and then the 5 months, and you know, we're month 7 right now into the year. Like, for me, this start of the year through to where we are today literally has been the most like the heaviest lifting I've seen Sky Mavis do for a very, very long time. And you know, shipping is like a constant thing a lot of time as well, but like just generally, like we spoke about at the start, the drastic changes that have happened, it must have been you know, all in. So I mean, maybe talk to us about what did a week look like in Ho Chi Minh City and in the offices and stuff like that?
So I love Vietnam, man. So
I need to go, man. I need to go.
my wife is Vietnamese, right?
Okay.
And so like Vietnamese culture has sort of always been in my life, right? Like there's a big Vietnamese community here in the Bay Area. You know, I grew up eating pho, right? And you know, drinking Vietnamese iced coffee. And I went to Vietnam for my honeymoon with my wife, right? And so this was sort of like, you know, it felt like my life was coming full circle, you know, like I you know, got this job with a Vietnamese based company, and now it was calling me back, you know.
It's funny how the universe works, bro. Trust me.
So we packed our bags and we moved to Vietnam, and you know, we got an apartment in District 2 in Vietnam, put the kids in an international school. And every day I was riding my little motor scooter into the Sky Mavis office in downtown Saigon, you know, and I was just living the life, right? And a little bit about me, I hate working from home, man. I cannot stand the remote work, right? And I love going in person, right? Feeling the vibes, the excitement, right? Because like my energy feeds off of other people's energy, and I love passing on energy, right? And that's really important for me, and that does a lot for my productivity and like my creativity, right? And so I knew that if I wanted, I knew that if I was going to successfully, you know, inspire people about Axie Core, I needed to be there in person, right? It's completely different, right, than just talking to someone over Google Meet and being like, hey, you know, I have this crazy vision, right? It's so I flew there. I knew I had to do it, right? And the vibe in the office is amazing, man. Like you said, everybody should go there one day, right? And it's just experience not only the Sky Mavis office, but Vietnam, right? Vietnam is extremely up and coming. It's becoming a huge, you know, crypto hub, right? Like honestly, Sky Mavis probably started that, you know. We probably kickstarted that, you know, the crypto scene here in you know, in Saigon. And there are a lot of like crypto startups coming up, right? It's a very crypto friendly country, and the talent there is amazing, right? And you can see that walking through the Sky Mavis office. It's just people are so talented, right? We have amazing smart contract engineers, amazing front end, back end developers, designers, product people, right? Across the board, talent is incredible in Vietnam. And like I spent 12 years in San Francisco, like from the very beginning of the startup boom, to now, and it's very akin to like early days San Francisco, when startups were kicking up.
Yeah.
And sorry, to answer your question, a week in the Sky Mavis office, it's very lively. People, it's amazing walking through. We have this beautiful office building that's like 2 floors, amazing balcony. You've probably seen pictures of that, like incredible balcony in our office. And people are just building, right? Like you could walk through the office and you'll see on people's screens, you'll overhear.
Oh, I was gonna say, you probably get all the leaks, man. Every day, you're probably like, damn, I can't even say anything.
There's an insane amount of leaks just walking through the office, hearing conversations, seeing what's on people's screens. That's why every time that we do like some press or like video recordings in the office, we got to make sure ahead of time, like, hey, there's gonna be a camera coming through today. Be careful what's on your screen, or like when guests come over, like, hey, be careful, right? So we try to be good about leaks. But yeah, it's really cool, working in the office. Like when I was there, I sat with the product team, right? So the product team is, other designers, product managers, my boss Leo, right, who's the head of product. We all sit in one little corner on the bottom floor of the Sky Mavis office, with a beautiful view of Ho Chi Minh City. And we're just jamming all day, right? It's like the most lively part of the office. And we talk about, everything, right? It's like we all work on everything within Sky Mavis, right? Axie, Ronin, Mavis, right? And it's awesome just being able to pull someone aside and be like, hey, I have this idea. I want to draw this on a whiteboard for you, and I'll just sketch it up, some random, Axie Infinity idea. And people will walk by and be like, hey, what are you guys talking about? That's cool, right? And the office is very much designed in an open format to encourage people to talk cross teams, right? Teams are not very siloed, right? I will go talk to the Ronin team, right? I'll go talk to the smart contract developers, right? I'll go talk with the engineers, the people on Mavis, right? People working on Mavis Hub, and it's very easy. It's very inviting in that way, right? Yeah,
that's nice. That's good to hear, man. Definitely on the bucket list to go see it at some point. And also, like you said, it's just influencing as well a scene in Vietnam for like a crypto hub. It's like, bro, we are on the precipice of of some big changes. I don't want to get into deep conversations about how the world is going to change because, I mean, whatever, it's going down, but we'll get over it. I wanted to pivot though, not really pivot because it's in the same question line about the job role itself, because I mentioned working at Discord beforehand. In terms of like designing products, has that like been a career path, like acknowledgement in an early phase? Like you saw like, I have a talent for bringing these things to life and being able to articulate what they should operate like and how they should look and things like that.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So my entire career, I'm a product designer by trade, right? I started my career more than 11 years ago, and my entire career I was a designer, right? I love designing. I love building and crafting beautiful user experiences, right? That's my expertise, right? So I started as a designer. Like you said, I worked at Discord right before Sky Mavis. At Discord, I led design for the bots and API squad, right? And in that squad, we were responsible for the entire developer ecosystem. So if you've ever used a / command on Discord, I designed that. I designed that experience.
Midjourney owes you a lot, bro.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was part of like I was like the founding designer of that new squad, basically, and now it's like one of the biggest, teams at Discord, thanks to Midjourney and, AI, right? And not just Midjourney, right? But there's a ton of apps.
There's a lot, yeah, of course.
The Discord developer scene is incredible, right?
You basically opened the doors to a creative freedom, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at Discord, I focused on, the experience of, doing all those things, right? And then I came to Sky Mavis, and I was a product designer, right? I continued that, right? Like it made sense. Like, I applied to Sky Mavis as a designer, as a product designer. I wanted to work on Axie Infinity and help expand the product, right? Work on the marketplace. At the time, like, in my mind, I was like, I want to go work on this marketplace, right? There's a lot of cool things that I could do with it. I want to expand it, in multiple different areas. And I got the job at Sky Mavis as a designer, right? Over time, though, my job sort of evolved, right? And it evolved where Axie Infinity needed me. So in the first place was, app.axie, right? I sort of conceived the notion of app.axie, like, right, we need to expand the marketplace. Before it was, the URL was marketplace.axieinfinity.com, right?
Yeah.
And it was primarily a marketplace where you could trade, buy, sell Axies. You could do a few other things on there, but for the most part, it was a place for our marketplace, right? And I conceived app.axie, and I said, like, listen, the Axie ecosystem is growing in so many ways that we can't even imagine, right? We need a place, a hub for all of these things. So app.axie became a thing, and now you can see that it's where not only you buy, sell Axies, it's where you interact with, Atia's blessing. It's where you portal, items into Origin, right? It's where you can stake your AXS now and land, right? And a bunch of other things coming, right? And so that was the beginning of my like transition into a product manager, right?
Yeah.
Or like a product lead of Axie Infinity. So at that point, not only was I designing the experiences, but I was product managing, Axie Infinity, right? And fast forward, months, Axie Core became a thing, and then I sort of leading product on Axie Core as well, right? And so I never envisioned, like back in the, if you were to ask me five years ago, do you envision yourself being a product manager? I would have been like, no, I don't ever care to be a product manager. I care about making beautiful user experiences, and the only way that I would have ever been a product manager is if it was something that I cared so deeply about, something that I was so passionate about that I would want to lead the product vision.
Yeah.
And that thing was Axie Infinity, right? Axie Infinity came along and changed my entire perception of what I wanted my career to be, right? And now, I still do care about the user experience and the design of Axie Infinity, and I still lead that, right? I still oversee the design of app.axie and Axie Core, but most of my time now is spent thinking about where Axie Infinity is going next, right?
Yeah.
Axie Core, right? App.axie, what does that look like in the next 6 months, the next 3 quarters, right? And where's Axie Core going next, right? And since then, I've hired 2 amazing designers who work with me. Emily, who lives in California as well, and Jack, who is based in Vietnam. They now handle a lot of the design, right? A lot of the day-to-day design work. So shout outs to them. They do design for app.axie, Axie Core and stuff. And I work closely with them. And most of my attention now is shift to leading the product vision, day-to-day product management and things like that. But like I said, I would have never imagined that this is where my career would have gone, and
well, aren't we glad that it bloody did? I'll tell you that. I really do think, from my own personal point, excuse me, but fuck what anyone else really thinks. I like for a long time, and I think it's been a community consensus that, like, and this might be because it's selective, but most of the time where you do come forward and you do speak on topics and you've communicated or interacted with the community, it's always been like, yeah. And I feel everyone's got that gist of Jeff Kam's a fucking G. Like, yeah, cool. We like Jeff Kam. Like, that's been for the longest time as well. But like, I wanted to, like, on that kind of topic, I was thinking in my head, you know, you have to think so much about what is to come, and like designing things that we are not yet, you know, in the knowledge of. Do you find that might like provide like a disconnect for you between the actual community right now and being involved with, you know, the current hype and what might be happening in the scene, because you have to constantly focus on what is ahead of you?
Yeah, so I think like my biggest advantage as somebody who leads product for Axie Infinity is that I come from the Axie community,
Yeah.
right? So before I ever worked here, right? Before I ever worked on Axie Infinity or Sky Mavis, I was a community member, right?
Hmm.
I joined in like that second wave, right? Right before the insane bull run in 2021, was it? No, yeah, 2021. I don't know. The insane bull run, right? I bought my Mystic at, you know, peak prices, right? My Mystic Axie. I bought land. I bought, you know, AXS. I was part of the community. I was playing Axie Infinity. I was engaging in the Discord, right? This was all before I joined Sky Mavis, right?
Yeah.
And so that's part of my advantage, I think, is that I am ingrained in the community. You know,
Yeah.
I was a community member, and I like to think that because I was so deeply ingrained in the community, um, I have a better connection
Yeah.
with you know with the players, the community, the collectors, right? Because I was them, I am them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I still am today. I still do all these things, right? Like, you know, when I'm done with work, I go do my hobbies, and my hobbies happen to be Axie Infinity,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. So and so I think that that helps me with my job, right?
Yeah, I wanted
And
to highlight that as well. Like from providing user experiences has to come from understanding what the user wants and then transitioning into a product designer whilst also being a user of those products. It's like you literally galvanized all of the viewpoints and the ways to kind of critique things and communicate things to be as efficient in the role as possible. So that's kind of sick. And like you were saying, the Vietnam thing, the full circle, the universe talks in certain ways, man. And like, but yeah, we've seen nothing but positives coming from product development in my opinion.
right, yeah.
Do you find there's a lot of opposing opinions though? Do you feel the pressure from elsewhere? You might not address them or
Yeah,
something?
there's a lot of pressure, man. I'm not gonna lie, it gets very, very stressful sometimes, right?
Hmm.
Because our community is so vocal, right?
Yeah.
And I've never experienced this in all the Web2, you know, companies and startups that I've worked for, right? But it makes sense, right? People have an invested interest in this project, right? People own Axies, they own AXS, right? And they care a lot about the direction, right? And so that's it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, it means that we get a ton of awesome feedback from very passionate players and users, right? But B, it's a lot of noise, right?
Yeah.
It's an insane amount of noise, and that's kind of why like Axie Infinity sort of like in its DNA, we love bear markets, right? Because we've been through multiple. Like we're one of the few you know, projects in the space that have been through multiple bear markets, right? So we've been through multiple, so we know what it's like to go through a bear market and build through a bear market, and we love them. I personally love them. You know, when Jiho used to talk about how, you know, how we love bear markets, I used to be like, "What are you talking about, man? Wouldn't it be great if it was just always a bull market, right?"
Yeah.
And then I experienced working here in a bear market,
Hmm.
and I was like, "This is awesome, right? It's
Yeah.
quiet, right?
I just see it as shit's cheap, bro.
You know, and yeah, but like in bear markets, only the most passionate people stick around, right? And those are the voices that I want to hear, right? The people who really care about Axie Infinity, the people who play this still to this day, even though you know, we're in a bear market, right? And so the bear market sort of acted as a filter for all this user feedback and all the noise, right? Whereas in the bull market, everyone was screaming at me, right? Everyone was telling me like, "Hey, this is what we should do. Here's what we need," right? And it was really hard to sort of sift through and like understand like what was the good feedback and what was the bad feedback, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of like, you know, why I personally like building through this bear market, right? And yeah, you're right. It's really hard to sort of it's stressful, right? To sort of get all this feedback, and like sometimes like we'll ship something and people will be like, what is this? Like, what is so cool about this? Why can't we have part upgrades right now, right? Why can't we do this? Why can't we have classic back? Why can't we, there's a lot of that, right? And it's part of the job is sort of to be able to take that in.
Yeah, get that prehistoric armor. Yeah, thick skin it.
Exactly, and then turn that into whatever the most effective, next thing is, right?
Yeah. Cool.
So all that feedback, even the bad stuff, that all is considered into the roadmap. Yeah.
Just take a pause here. We're coming up towards the back end of into, but it's been fire so far, man. I'm like, yo, we are moving. Yeah. I'm gonna start probing, Jeff. So if you haven't said anything that, if you haven't said anything that's out of line yet, these might be the
that's okay, probe.
Next few moments. But no, yeah. So understanding obviously the need for keeping information internal for the time being. This one's for you guys, right, community? In the short term, Jeff, what can we maybe be excited for? And short term, by that I mean maybe end of this quarter.
Yeah. So we were just entering Q3, right? Yeah. So we just finished Q2. We're entering Q3, and Q3 of 2023 might be the most important quarter in Axie Infinity's history. No.
Before, I'm sorry, but before I ask that question, like, I had to do the math in my head because sometimes I'm a bit brain dead before I start thinking, obviously. But like, I realized what quarter it is, and obviously the back end of the year, knowing that there's like things building up, and I thought, you know what, we might have like a super fire round of some nice stuff coming up.
I think that I don't know, for some reason, Axie Infinity loves the second half of the year. So Q3 is very important for us, right? It's what we've been building up to for many years, and Q4 as well, right? So the second half of this year is going to be very important for Axie Infinity, and it starts with this idea that I like to call Axie progression. So Axie progression is a term that I use. It's this umbrella term that contains a lot of different things, right? But it starts with AXP and leveling, right? So I've talked about AXP and leveling. AXP is this global experience system that your Axie can gain AXP from different experiences throughout the ecosystem and level up on chain, right? And that's the foundation of Axie progression, right? So after that will be part upgrades. So once we have the foundation of AXP and leveling in place, we can ship part upgrades, right? And part upgrades is, we've been talking about part upgrades since 2018, right? It was part of the initial vision. It's why people are playing Axie Infinity and invested in Axie Infinity to begin with, because they loved the vision of being able to play with your Axie and upgrade it over time, right? And it becomes more, it molds with you as you play, right? It becomes stronger. It becomes you become more emotionally attached to it because you've invested in it, right? And that will be one of the most important things that we ship, right, this year. So if not the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
And so Axie progression includes AXP leveling, part upgrades. With part upgrades, there are a lot of other infrastructure type things that we got to ship, right? So one is materials, right? So materials is this new collection of things, of NFTs that will be that you'll need in order to upgrade your Axies. So to get a little bit more specific, you'll have to release your Axie to get materials, and you use those materials to upgrade your Axie, right? That all ties together with the AXP and your level and things like that. But once we have that sort of completes the core loop of Axie progression and Axie Core, right? And then there's other Axie progression things further on, right? That I won't talk about yet today. But the idea is Axies should be should have more depth, right? Today, if you think about Axies, like it doesn't really have any depth, right? Like they have these static parts. You could breed them, you could play them in different games, but they don't grow, right? They don't grow with you, right? Like you could spend thousands of hours with your Axie, right, in playing games, but nothing happens, right? And so the goal with Axie progression, this giant umbrella feature, is to give Axies more depth. Not only just get stronger, right, but they should have personalities that adjust to you, right,
Yeah.
the player, and the different experiences that you play with it, right? It should have emotions, right? And what are the ways that we can make Axies more deep, right? More immersive, more respond to like user feedback, right? And that's sort of what one of the higher level goals for us for Axie progression and Axie Core. But yeah, so that's sort of what's coming up, later the second half of this year for Axie Infinity, amongst a bunch of other things.
Well, I'll be damned. GG's. Let's move on to the other one. Thank you for that. Yeah, exciting year ahead. I want to touch on Sky Mavis as a whole, and this is now we'll take the lens out here and we're looking and overviewing the gaming industry as a whole. Now, my firm belief is obviously that what is happening here at Sky Mavis and in other places as well in the world right now, that we are participating in industry changing events, so to speak, and building industry changing tools. What is it that Sky Mavis does that's industry changing for you?
Yeah. So I think there's two levels to this. The first level is at the Axie Infinity level. I think for us, we're doing something that I think nobody else is really doing. And I sort of talked about this a little bit, right? We're not building one game, right? Every other gaming NFT project, right, to my knowledge, is focused on building one game, right? One game that has really great gameplay, maybe includes some Web3 mechanics and tokenomics and stuff like that, and that's what they're focused on, right? That's not what we're doing, right? At Axie Infinity, we're not building one game, right? We're trying to build a universe. We're trying to build a strong IP, a strong brand, a strong experience for players, right? That includes many games, right? That are built by not only us but the community, right? And other studios. Yeah. All built on top of strong Web3 fundamentals, right? And so we're not going to ignore Web3 fundamentals, right? Like, yes, absolutely. Like the counter argument to that is, all these, transaction signing and, tokens and NFTs and stuff creates a bad user experience. And we understand that, right? We get that, right? We understand that having to sign a transaction every time you, interact with a Tia's blessing, that's a bad user experience. We get that, yeah. Right? But
in some ways, yes. But I mean, in my way, just click a fucking button, bro. But okay, yeah,
yeah. So we understand that, deeply integrating Web3 into our game and our ecosystem could make a bad experience, right? At least not ideal, right? And that's a challenge that the entire crypto industry is dealing with, right? But this goes to the second layer, right, of what Sky Mavis does best. Is at the Sky Mavis level, we own the experience from end to end, right? That was one of our strengths very early on, right? Is we built Ronin for Axie Infinity, right? We built the perfect chain for Axie Infinity and its players and its community, right? And now we've expanded that into the Mavis side, Mavis Market, right? And all the cool features that Mavis is coming out with, right? Mavis Hub, etc. Right? And that is our advantage, right? And that's what we're sort of doing differently. Is that not only did we create the game, we created the blockchain, we created all the infrastructure that any game needs to survive, right? On this blockchain, right? And we've got the people, the expertise that can help make that happen, right? Yeah. And Axie Infinity is sort of just the first big case study, right, for Sky Mavis. Axie Infinity is the first giant customer of Sky Mavis's tools, right? Of its blockchain, of its Mavis system, ecosystem, and that's what we're sort of doing differently, and that's where our advantage lies. I think is that on the Axie Infinity level, we're not just building a game; we're building an entire ecosystem universe, that which nobody else is doing. I think, right? Tied together with Axie Core, core assets, core tokens, core materials, and shared NFTs, mechanics, all powered by Ronin, which we also made, right? And so by owning that entire experience end to end, right, the entire stack, we have the advantage, I think.
Yeah, most certainly. And also positive to know, in advance, and this is for those that never read white papers, but the distribution structure that is already announced and in black and white, in white specifically, but for you to understand as a participant in the ecosystem as well. Pretty damn cool. Mavis Market, one of the things you mentioned there, and I haven't spoken about it yet. I know it's in its premature phases, and at the moment there's I believe 2 projects that are actually on the Mavis Market. Do you have any overseeing of Mavis Market, or is it your field, or?
That's not really. Yeah. So the Mavis ecosystem is sort of a separate team.
Okay.
Right. But I work very closely with everybody who works on that. Right. So there's a lot of feedback that goes back and forth. Right. Like I'll give them feedback, they'll give us feedback. We'll work together. Right. Because like I said, right, we're all part of the same giant ecosystem. So we have to make sure that everything that we're building is complementary. Right. Yeah. So because like there will be Axie Infinity assets, IP assets that appear on Mavis Market, just like we see, doll sidekicks, right? There are doll sidekicks on Mavis Market. So what they're doing is very important to us. So it's important to make sure that we're all in sync. Yeah.
All right. I'll only ask one question on it then, and yeah, feel free to pass this all the way to the side. Do you expect it to become broad enough for general members of the community to operate with it in a way where they are basically able to mint?
I think so. The long-term vision for Ronin in general is to be fully decentralized, right, and open, right? Like we've already said that, we've stated that in the past, that is part of our vision, right? We want anybody to one day be able to deploy a smart contract, right? And so that trickles down to things like Mavis Market, right? So yeah, like one day, I don't know when this is, right? I don't know what the logistics looks like, but I think that is a possibility in the future. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jeff, listen, I think we got some amazing takes, a lot of insight as well onto all of the things that we've advanced. Honestly, there's probably a lot more that we could do. I do want to keep it short and sweet though, just because of how much value is packed in, and I really think it's a lot. It's a lot to take in. So I appreciate you for coming through, man. Hopefully at some point in real life events are a thing again, and maybe we get to see each other again once more. Any last words you'd like to leave with the community? Anything that you'd like to keep fresh on our mind in this intense quarter ahead of us? Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. I think final words, I would say, as the rest of this year plays out, as Sky Mavis and Axie Infinity continues to ship new things, I'd say, for all players and content creators, for Axie Infinity out there, keep an open mind. Keep an open mind. Try new things, right? With new features that come out, when we ship new things, try it out, see how you like it, tweet about it, create some content, and there will, like, moving forward, it will very much be, an Axie Infinity, core thing, right? Like, there will be new games that come out. There will be new mechanics, things that you can do, right? New things that you can collect, right? So the Axie ecosystem and the ways that you could play Axie Infinity is going to explode this year. It's going to grow immensely, right? And that's one of our goals, is to, expand the ways that people can interact and play Axie Infinity, right? And today the communities, like the content in the community, is heavily skewed towards Origins stuff, right? There's a little bit of doll content, there's a little bit of breeding content, right? And I would love to see the community, as Axie Core and Axie Infinity releases new things, I'd love to see the community sort of try a lot of things out, right?
Yeah.
Try breeding, try upgrading, right? See what kind of content you can make with upgrading, upgrading parts and things like that.
Yeah, that smells like cutscenes to me. I'm not gonna say no more. Actually, one thing I want to say, because this is fresh, like this is straight out of the oven, or straight out. Yeah, it's just been dished up. It's on Twitter right now. It started trending earlier today, from what I saw. Somebody did like almost like a trailer of a new game mode and called it Draft.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I saw that. Yeah.
Just the last little piece, leave us with like some thoughts, maybe.
Yeah.
The possibility of something like that being real.
So yeah. So I mean, I think it's very cool. I like that the community is pitching game modes like that. I'd love to see them do more of that in general, right? And not just within Origins, right? But anywhere, right? Like if there's a cool new breeding mechanic that you want to see, right?
Yeah.
If there's a specific thing you want to see with part upgrades, right? Or Axie progression, should Axies do something else, right? Pitch that, make a really cool production like we've seen with this draft mode, right? Yeah. And that really gets our attention. So when I woke up this morning, like, that video was shared in the Sky Mavis, Slack channel, and we talked about it, right? There's the whole company has seen it, right? And
there you go.
Production value gets our attention, right? Mm-hmm. It's different than just dropping a tweet, with no images or anything, right? Like this kind of production value gets our attention and gets us thinking and talking about it, right? Yep. I won't comment on whether we like it or not, but in general, we like when the community pitches well thought out ideas like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can tell it's probably it's been composed of a cultivation of thoughts anyway. It's not just like someone just go, I'm gonna
exactly.
So yeah, I see what you guys are saying, but for you lot that are out there listening to this, just know that, like, hey, if you believe in something out here and you display to people that you believe it enough through the actions and what you produce, then you never know, opportunities are there for real.
Yeah, but no. So if there's anything Axie Core related, any Axie Core specific mechanics, hit me up, right? Tag me on Discord, tag me on Twitter, right? I read every single tweet that I'm tagged in, and I take it all into consideration.
Much love. Jeff, thank you so much for today. It's been cool catching up with you for sure. And yeah, like I said, I hope to see you in the future. And let's go, man. Let's have an exciting rest of the year, and let's see what happens, man. Take care though.
Yeah, man. Always happy to talk with you, man. And we'll see each other soon.
So
cool.
Yeah. Recording done, bro.